I'm very glad to be part of this workshop and to learn a lot about figures I didn't really know about. And I am looking forward to learning more, in fact, from our two speakers. Our first speaker is Anna Nayel, who did a PhD at Jamia with Professor Nishad Zaidi, and is on Urdu popular culture, which, as we know, is a topic that is much understudied and required. So very much looking forward to what are your publications, and today we are talking about Heart, Home and Beyond, Begum Asif Mujib's short fiction. Please.
So the title of the paper that I've written today is Heart, Home and Beyond, Begum Asifa Mujib's short fiction. Then I would like to start with a quote from a story, Ehsan Manzil by Intizar Hussain. Maulvi Sahab saw a packet with monthly Ismat printed on it. Beneath it, in red ink, the packet was addressed to Sheikh Irfanul Haq's daughter. Maulvi Meherban Ali could not believe his eyes. He forgot his own money order and returned home with a new story to tell. He relayed that a magazine bearing the name of Irfanul Haq's daughter is lying at the post office to some of the more mature individuals in the neighborhood. But such news cannot be kept from people for long. Soon the news of magazines arriving for Irfanul Haq's virgin daughter spread like wildfire. Magazines coming for an unmarried daughter itself was embarrassing enough. Furthermore, it had the daughter's name on the envelope. Delhi is far away. Who knows how many and what kind of men had read her name? So the quote above is an excerpt from a short story written in Urdu by Intizar Hussain. In this tale, we see how the lives of Indian Muslims were going through a transition because of the introduction of print culture. Hussain provides an insight into the ways in which religious reform, equal access to education, and colonial modernization threatened and ultimately altered the more traditional parts of middle class Muslim life in North India during the first quarter of the 20th century. The anxieties of a woman's name being used in the public domain is shared by communities all around the Muslim world, as shown in images of their homes. Asia Jibar, in her book Fantasia, similarly depicts how the arrival of a postcard from her father addressed to her mother caused an uproar among her female relatives in colonial Algeria. Because of this, a woman in a Muslim family receiving mail, whether a card, letter, or a magazine subscription, has come to symbolize the introduction of modernity, the introduction of the public and the outside world into the traditional Muslim morality and home. Since the beginning of 20th century, feminist philosophers and authors in the first world have registered a variety of alternative voices via the act of writing as political activity. Limiting themselves to the geographical domains of Europe and North America, the feminist academic discourses of the first world barely acknowledged the multifaceted gendered environment of South Asia and the daily confrontations women in the area face. It was the corrective interventions of South Asian feminists that exposed the culturally specific invisibilities and silences surrounding female authors in academia and beyond. Third world feminist gender and sexuality discourses might succeed, however partially, in removing gender barriers in literary and historical studies in South Asia, thus reorienting humanities scholarship. Identified as subversive and alternative, the new discourses generated a non-occupied social audience around the globe, whilst the mainstream feminist researchers with Eurocentric gazes continued to reject such an audience outside of the West, as scholars have noted. As South Asian feminist discourses attacked the obscure lifestyles of oppressed Oriental female subjects in contemporary study, the cures for such responsible absences and presences made their way into new literature and writers. Emerging from this newly recognized literary vitality, a number of new academic researchers began to represent the unrepresentable voices of South Asian women from a variety of geographical places. On the basis of new archives and political processes in South Asian areas such as India and Pakistan, new theorizing of decolonial feminism has placed violence and caste at the center of new discussions. Decolonial feminist discourses in the third world countries examine new problems around family, marriage, desires, intimacy, public space, work, education, health, and political and religious engagement. Yasmin Saikia writes about the subliminal presence of narratives in the lives of South Asian women. She writes, and I quote, "Stories are the stuff of life." In the Indian subcontinent, storytelling is a highly developed tradition. People tell real and fantastic stories about humans and non humans, monsters and gods, about the seen and the unseen. Grandparents tell stories to grandchildren, mothers to daughters, and stories are shared between neighbors and communities. The circle, the circles of the stories continue to expand. Storytelling is a currency for making human connections. It is in this context of storytelling that I have placed Begum Asifa Mujib's fiction. She is known to have written a lot of literature, stories, dramas, poems, uh, travelogues for children, and there was one book of short stories which was titled Parind aur Dusre Afsane, which I have taken up to study in this paper. In her book Hamari Jamia, Sughra Mehti describes Begum Asfa Mujib as a gharara clad, pan chewing, beautiful woman who was widely popular and loved by everyone in the Jamia community. Wife to Muhammad Mujib, she was daughter of Maqbool Hassan, an affluent and successful advocate of Hardoi. She moved to Jamia after her wedding in 1929 and dedicated her subsequent life in taking care of her immediate family and the Jamia family at large. Uh, on the fifth poster, that's a photo, the top, if you want to place a face to the woman I'm talking about. That's Asfa Mujib. So she was born in 1906 and she died in 1985. In her lecture on Khawateen Awwal, Saida Hamid points out that out of many of the forgotten women that were instrumental in the success of Jamia, Begum Asfa comes first. Muhammad Mujib was the vice chancellor for over 25 years and drew a small salary in which Begum Asfa took care of the household. The couple had a large home and hosted anybody who needed accommodation and hospitality as a new entrant to Jamia. Meher Fatma Hussain, in her book on Muhammad Mujib, writes how Begum Asapa dedicated her life in fulfilling her husband's dreams for Jamia as she also made them her own. She did so with her own writings, her welcoming nature, and her involvement in social life. When writing about their first encounter, Saleh Abid Hussain describes her thus in a memoir titled Mujib Sahab और भाभी आसफा. She writes, उनकी दिलकश भोली भाली सूरत, शानदार डील डॉल और आराइश और ज़ेबाइश आज तक मेरी नज़रों में फिर जाती है. It was the beginning of a lifelong companionship that made them a part of each other's families. Their togetherness weathered many phases of Jamia as it grew from a small establishment to a renowned university. Apart from domestic intimacy, they were together in social gatherings organized for the women in Jamia. Begum Asifa was the president of Jamia Anjuman for Women and she spoke on these occasions as well. She accompanied women and girls on picnics in Delhi, showing them the city. Although Saleh Abid Hussain writes that Begum Asifa didn't particularly enjoy being away from Muhammad Mujib, whom she addressed as Sahab. Her relationship with Muhammad Mujib was that of love and devotion, and Saleha writes how Begum Asifa selflessly tended to her ill husband for over a decade, representing true grit and commitment. Her writings hence come as a slight surprise to the reader as they reflect an existential dilemma in which neither scenario comes out winning. She majorly wrote for kids, travelogue, stories, essays, but her only collection of stories titled Parind aur Dusre Afsane, published by Maktaba Jamia, is what this paper intends to throw light on. The collection is rather small, 8 stories, with no obvious theme or similarity apart from the fact that they squarely put the aches and desires of heart at the center of the plot. It's self destructive in inexplicable ways, but Asifa's protagonists follow their heart. They put themselves through hardships because they choose a kind of self fashioning that is allowed only by their conscience. One wouldn't address this fiction as feminist so much as existential as they question the purpose and meaning of human life. The paper intends to look at some portions of these stories to piece together the literary aesthetic of Begum Asifa, which emerges to be extremely nuanced and aware of human desire to be free and uninhibited. The first story, Parind, is about Zebu, a runaway teenage girl who is found roaming the street streets and given shelter in Aziza Begum's generous household. At first, she seems very content and enjoys the newfound comfort very appealing, and she quickly makes herself at home. She plays with the kids. She participates in all the household chores. However, there are glimpses of rebellion that Aziza Begum and her companion Bua Nasiban are able to gauge, but also unable to address because Zebu has a very strong and stubborn nature. True to the title of the story, Parinth, Zebu nurtures a spirit of freedom and finds herself disenchanted with the safety and care of home. And I quote from the story. um, क्या ये शोख और चंचल परिंदा मोहब्बत के सुनहरे तारों में जकड़बंद होकर खुश रह सकता है? ये लतीफ़ माहौल, रंगीन फ़िज़ा, उम्मीदों की दिलफ़रेब दुनिया और उसकी दिल आवेज़ियाँ उसे आज़ादी की लाइंतिहाई गैर महदूद मसरतों से हमकिनार कर सकती हैं. Turns out that the bird flies away one day and is found by the munshi of the family, again roaming the streets in the same fashion as she was found some months ago. And Begum Asifa writes that the munshi witnesses, उन्होंने देखा कि ज़ेबू चूड़ीदार पैजामा, गरम अचकन पहने, टोपी दिए, जेबों में हाथ डाले, बड़ी शान से सड़क पर टहल रही है. So she has disguised herself as a young boy. न कोई फिक्र न कोई गम, आंखों में आज़ादी की चमक, रग रग में शोखी भरी, कभी कुछ गुनगुनाती थी, कभी किसी से मर्दाना बोली में बातें करती थी. So she is found like this and she is brought home immediately because it's unsafe for her to be out and this is not the right place for a girl to be. When Zebu is eventually brought back home, she apologizes in earnest to Aziza Begum and expresses her deep regret of having taken this ungodly decision. But as the story ends, she runs away again and is nowhere to be found. So the back and forth between the outside world and its offerings and the security of home and hearth are conflicting even in Zebu's own mind. When she's asked why she ran away in the first place, she simply replies that she wanted to take a little tour. That's all. Her desire to be free stems from the simple want of excitement, so much so that she is ready to give up everything for it. Similar desire is witnessed in the story Khandhar, where Kallu, who wants to break away from another kind of prison. He's extremely poor, he's an aging mother, an ailing sister, but he still gives up a lucrative job in the city only to come home and become a vagrant. Asifa writes how it was unacceptable to Kallu's conscience to work among dishonest and deceitful men in an unknown city, and he breaks free from their company by resigning from his job. And she writes, जिंदगी इस कदर तल्ख और दहशत अंगेज दिखाई पड़ती थी कि जी चाहता था कि ये सारा जाल तोड़कर आज़ाद हो जाए. Later, when he comes home, he is hounded by neighbors over what a fool he had been, much in the same way like the army of servants and neighborhood women chided Zebu for running away. Both of them desire to break away from their circumstances, fully aware that the other side is not easy, but only the heart knows what it wants. Three other stories titled Naya Makan, Bade Miyan Ki Yaad Mein, and Qaumi Rehnuma stand out as subtle satires on the state of hypocrisy and selfishness in society. In Naya Makan, Ahmad Mian, after seeing his colleague's new house, is green with envy. He desires a personal space. His house is too much with his sons and daughters and grandchildren. After a lot of thought and discussion, he takes up the task of designing upon himself. This would be his retirement home, his safe haven, and he spends considerable time and effort in building it. The men of the house regularly visit the building when it is under construction. The women folk, however, they do not. When it's finally ready, he takes the women of the house for a visit. Turns out that the house has no privacy since there are no bedrooms but just one big hall on the first floor. There is no ventilation. The windows are replaced with doors that are far too dangerous for the kids. So the doors are closed and there's one big hall. And top of everything, there is no toilet in the house. So when asked for the feedback on the house, a young woman relative quips by saying that the house should be declared a monument for people to see and as a lesson for architects whose imagination is not as free-spirited as Ahmad Mia's. And Ahmad Mia takes this as a compliment. He's very happy. He comes back home very proud of himself. And that's how the story ends. So, and in another story, Qaumi Rehnuma, Begum Asifa takes a dig at the lack of manners in people who are considered ideals in society. Two sisters visit a crowded jalsa where they encounter a senior woman leader whom they had also seen elsewhere. Out of respect, they give up their chairs for the newcomers, only to be treated like servants throughout the program. They keep running errands for them. They bring them water. When the lecture comes to a close, the leader summons the narrator to arrange for her car, which she obeys immediately, and the senior women whisk away without so much as a greeting or gratitude, even taking with them their hand fan that they had borrowed. In a similar vein, in the story Bade Miyan Ki Yaad mein, Anwar Miyan overshadows the Sayyum of his father with a grand meal fit for a wedding reception and makes a huge fuss about his efficiency and generosity. It is revealed towards the end that neighbor Khan Bahadur, in whose home the cooks had set up a temporary kitchen and the food was being served, was not being sent any food until after everyone in his family had already slept. This lapse of judgment on behalf of Anwar Mia comes under a strong critique by Begum Asifa as she brings out the pretense and insincerity of such pompous acts. It is important to state that much of this criticism comes from the fact that Begum Asifa took hospitality and good manners as part of being Sharif. David Lelveld argues that the word Sharif was initially used as an honorific based on Prophet Muhammad's ancestry. It was a symbol of both religious prestige and social loyalty. In Mughal India, however, it increasingly came to signify respectability according to cosmopolitan Mughal criteria. As the imperial authority was highly regarded and revered throughout the Indian subcontinent, the royal family had the authority to promote individuals to the status of Ashraf based solely on good conduct. The concept of Sharif evolved from strictly genealogical definitions to court sanctioned versions of socio cultural performance, allowing, in theory at least, anyone to become Sharif. These characteristics included a refined appreciation of aesthetics, knowledge of the arts and literature, and a nuanced appreciation of culture. However, in the era of post 1857 colonial North India, Deputy Nazir Ahmad, through his realist novels, provided this emergent community a new way to develop relationships with erstwhile authority, that is, the British, like they had done with the Mughals. Some of the characteristics that were symbolic of this new Ashraf culture, that were both modern and historically relevant, precipitated through his works. Mushtaq Bilal, in his work on the emergence of the novel community, if in Mughal India the Ashraf had received Allah's sharaf through Mughal court, in colonial India they looked to the colonial state for sharaf in terms of material rewards and subversions of a colonial state's authority. Colonial state's authority became tantamount to defying Allah's order. In this light, it is also noteworthy to observe that Nazir Ahmad's star performer, Asghari, espouses colonial virtues like mixing with her own kind of people, saving money, not being decadent and frivolous, and laying a huge emphasis on education. These are the qualities that also came to be associated with broader understanding of Ashraf values, as some of these practices aligned well with the Islamic teachings of frugality and resourcefulness. And these are the kind of qualities that one also sees in stories that are written by Begum Asifa, as she writes about domestic space, she writes about cooking, taking care of relatives, and running a huge household on a very little salary. Margaret Purnau, in her work on middle class values in late 19th century colonial India, writes that the new meaning of Sharif laid less emphasis on birth, noble lineage, and inherited qualities, and more on behavior and achievement. While this in itself could be taken as an indicator for a new middle class consciousness, the required behavior too underwent a significant change. In contrast to the values of the nobility, which emphasized abundance of money as well as time, here the husbanding of resources received primary importance. Demonstrative consumption and spontaneity were no longer important. Instead, hard work, the capacity to plan and to stick to planning, and punctuality became the new keywords. So, and I wanted to write about this because while talking about the domestic space, it seems like Begum Asifa is very concerned with taking care of people, but also being within our own means. Even the details of everyday household activities in the stories are evident of her familiarity with the domestic space and running it efficiently. Equipped with a wide array of servants, In the story Parind, Aziza Begum is seen cooking, sewing, attending guests, and taking major decisions of the household. The men are practically non existent in the Zanana. She is commanding but also soft hearted. In the story Khandar, where Kallu's mother Kulsum is extremely hard pressed to make both ends meet, one witnesses frugality and prudence as she offers her son the best she possibly can. Towards the end of story, when Kulsum is very old, taking care of her grandson, she comes to meet Kallu. She brings a dessert, dal and roti. Asifa's women are adept at and nurturing, albeit they are unfortunate and a victim of their circumstances. It is rarely that they revolt against the customs, but they air their concerns to a confidant or anyone who sympathizes. As a reader, their apprehensions and distress reflect strongly, unbeknownst to those around them. There is also a painful tinge of loneliness and aloofness that comes with desire. The protagonists seek refuge from the world they inhabit and, unable to do so, find themselves utterly lonely in this pursuit. There is Zebu, the young and vivacious girl who, after roaming the streets in the guise of a boy, having tasted the sweet nectar of freedom, is brought back home, much to her chagrin. She sits on the staircase, her head on her knees, and listens to the diatribes of servants. Asifa paints a melancholic picture. ज़ेबू ज़ेबू सीढ़ियों पर सर झुकाकर बैठ गई। उसके गिर्द फिर मजमा हो गया। ये क्या किस्सा है? जितने मुंह उतनी बातें। सबकी नज़रों में वो खार की तरह खटक रही थी। हर शख्स इतना खाइफ और लर्जा था जैसे कोई वो बला हो। ज़ेबू के चेहरे पर गम की स्याह घटा छाई थी। कलेजा जैसे छलनी हुआ जा रहा था। इतने लोगों में से कोई हमदर्द नहीं। Kishwar, who is in an unhappy marriage but unable to abandon her husband, cuts another lonesome figure. And Begum Asfa writes, किश्वर यूं बैठी थी जैसे दुनिया से कोई लगाव नहीं। मैंने देखा कि भरा घर था, लेकिन वो सबसे अलग थलग रहती। मुझसे इतनी बेतकल्लुफी थी, मगर मालूम होता था कि अब ना कुछ कहना चाहती है और ना कुछ सुनना। Begum Asfa's literary world is that of contrasts. It offers a glimpse of what could be, a world of safety and certainty, and a world that offers a future that is secure but on a condition that there are compromises to be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much.